So you don't always have to come to the table. I believe you would agree with me, Kemba, that we can use other people's money to get started in real estate. Sometimes that's an investor, sometimes that's the government, sometimes it's your pension plan or your RSPs, right? So there's different ways. So I don't think that you always have to come with money, but it helps to establish good habits around money to be successful at it.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Disrupt the Everyday. In this conversation, we are talking all things real estate. If you're looking to get into real estate right now in this hot market, if you're looking at investing in a rental property, cottage, or even looking 5 years down the line for your long-term goal, this conversation is for you. Today, we're joined by co-founders of KEAN Real Estate Group, Andrea and Kemba Williams. Andrea and Kemba, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Tanya. We are really happy, and thanks for the invite. And hopefully we can share all our little tidbits and knowledge with you while we're here.
Perfect. So we like to start the conversation by asking, who is Andrea and who is Kemba Williams?
Well, we're sister-in-laws. That's how we are sort of joined at the hips, right, Kemba? But really, myself, formerly, I was a full-time school teacher for many years. I was looking at ways to build wealth for myself and my family, and my husband and I thought, you know what, our jobs may not be enough. Let's look at how we can do that through real estate. We just sort of bumped into some reading, a magazine that I discovered at the time, and started exploring that. We were already interested in buying additionally. And we decided that that's something that we try. I mean, I've always been interested in working with people, and I figured that would still allow me to work with the parents of the children that I formerly taught and educate them on how to build wealth through real estate, like we have been working ourselves to do. And then Kemba and I decided to, as we married into the same family, we decided that she was already doing some of what we were doing with her husband, and we just decided we'd work together and build a company. And that's how we built KEAN. We've been doing it for years on our own individually, and then we decided we'd put it together, and we formulated, Kemba, was it 2019?
2019, yeah.
So you can go ahead with the rest, Kemba. Oh, and don't forget, I have kids. Oh my goodness, I apologize. I have 3 kids that I love dearly, and we were doing it not just for ourselves as a couple, my husband and I, but for our children, right? To build that legacy.
Yes. And similar, like I started, I guess when I left university, I just sort of said, how am I going to buy? It took a while, and I got into buying my first a triplex because I needed the mortgage helper, and that first experience kind of slowed me down because I was like, oh, wow, this is a lot, tenanting and all that stuff. And I feel like, if I had mentors and sort of training and coaching at the time, I would have moved faster. And, so I did that for some years. I met my husband, we continued buying. And, and then it's funny, Andrea and I talk about this a lot because we were part of the same family, but it took us years to figure out that we both had a passion for investing in real estate and so on. And, Andrea did these info sessions on her own, back, I don't know, like however long ago, Andrea, what was that? And you invited me out. I was like, what's Andrea doing? And I came out and I learned some of the stuff she was doing. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then it just took off from there that we would talk about it all the time. And, we started building and growing from there from a real estate perspective, And for me, a change point for me was when I started having children. I realized that, just what I was doing may not be enough to kind of build and grow for them. And so that's what sort of accelerated me into making it into a business and growing more and buying more real estate. So
and leaving your job eventually.
Yes, and leaving my job eventually. I mean, obviously this crazy last 14 to 18 months has been a catalyst in a lot of things because it's just changed our perspective on so much, and just, so that was part of, just taking the big leap and moving on from my full-time. And now I'm full-time in my passion project.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, are your husbands in real estate as well?
They are supporters of our real estate. So they're like our cheerleaders, our maintenance staff for the properties, and are great. They're good at the electronics and technology stuff that we can't do and the little fixings, but no. They're not as passionate about us. They're like, oh, could the key ladies stop this talking all the time about real estate?
It's true. It's so true. It's like, yeah, are we done yet? Are we done yet? That's sort of like what happens when we get together. Talking about all these things, and
We're known as the key ladies to our husbands.
so it's nice that they support us and they're engaged. We have conversations, but they're definitely not at the forefront of let's jump into this project or let's jump into that project, for sure.
If there's a car there, a fast car, or they do like the car aspect or the number of garage that we can have on that property.
Okay. So Andrea, I actually came across an article that both of you were in back in February, and you guys were just talking about just what you were saying, right? Building wealth and, teaching people how to build legacy through properties. So I saw that article, and then I saw, Andrea, that during this pandemic, your family of 5, I think your oldest moved out, but you can clarify, sold, or you can clarify, your house in Brampton that you were in, and currently living now in a condo that you had purchased to rent out. So can you share with us how that came to be?
So I just had an insane moment because, it was COVID and I was already doing what's crazy. So I felt like I was losing it anyways. I was home all the time. And my eldest, you're right, she decided to move out during COVID. And I was like, you sure you want to? But when she decided to do that, we were a family of 5. Once she made the decision to move out on her own into a property that we owned as well, we thought, okay, we could do this. So I suggested to Dean, who had always wanted to move back into Toronto, to move in using the condo as the means to do that. Because in a few more years, with our second daughter going off to university and probably asking the same of us if she could move out, we figured we may not need the same space. And we did not sell that 3,000 square foot home.
Okay.
It was actually a property that we bought at the outset of starting our marriage. And to be honest, Tanya, it never made sense for us to sell it because it helped us use the actual equity in that home to buy additional properties, including the condo. So it did make sense to move into the condo in that we had a lot of things. We didn't know COVID was going to last this long, but we had a lot of things that were in Toronto that made sense for us. Kemba, my business partner's there, and some of the business that we do is right there in Toronto. My youngest is in acting, and we do a little bit on the side. A lot of the actual events that are circulating that, all the auditions and stuff are right downtown. So it sort of fit and it made sense. Now, the last year we've been doing a lot of self-tapes and a lot of stuff through Zoom, but we expect it to resume once, COVID changes. And so numbers wise, it definitely made sense. Our Brampton home could garner a lot more income rented, and our condo in Toronto, which was taking a bit, the market was changing a lot with the condos, that it made more sense if we were going to make a change in the upcoming year or two. It made sense to make it then because we would now not have the concerns of taking a reduced rent that the condo market was now, garnering. Like the income for that would have been less than the income for the property in Brampton. And so we're all about numbers as well. And to be honest, I didn't think my husband would agree to it. I thought he would think 300 square feet to 700. I just thought, yeah, he wouldn't, but he did. He loved the thought. And we're closer to his family, his mom, who he loves and wants to be closer to his work. It's a shorter commute. And of course, his friends eventually, without COVID, we'll get to see.
It will all be a benefit. So then you guys are renting the home in Brampton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I think there was a basement apartment. So do you rent out both, or is it one family then?
No, we rent out both.
Okay.
So the long-term tenant that was in the basement wouldn't have we offered for her if she was interested in leaving, and she said no. So she stayed on, and we rented the upstairs as well.
All right. Now, Kemba, maybe you want to kick this one off, but I'm curious because both of you had established careers. Why real estate?
Is how far back can I go? I
Go back to the beginning.
Well, why real estate? I think I've always loved, real estate just as a thought, and just houses and homes. Even I think of when I was a kid, I used to draw little houses with a coconut tree because I grew up in the Caribbean, and it was something that fascinated me from then. But once I'm up here, and you work really hard at your job. You dedicate a lot of time and energy, and there's a lot of benefits to having good and being well employed. But I also feel that there's some limitations to what you can do sometimes and how your wealth can grow, because you're really just sometimes looking to pay bills. And what I saw from just starting out in real estate was that, when I bought that triplex, I had tenants, I had mortgage helper, it helped me pay things down quicker. I think when I bought in 2007, the property grew, it just kept growing up, and it was a global recession in 2008, and nothing affected that investment. It just kept growing. So there was a lot of learning along the way. And I just felt like, the growth, you can't replicate that in employment. So that was part of my sort of impetus. And then once I had kids, and Toronto is a super expensive place to live, I just was like, okay, how am I going to pay for daycare? And how am I going to pay for, and so owning real estate also helped me with, being able to manage those big expenses and so on. So I felt like to share how I've been able to do what I've been able to do makes sense, because a lot of people struggle, and real estate is not an easy business. It's not necessarily just, set it and forget it. There's a lot of work involved in maintaining property, relationships with tenants. This year, I can tell you some stories, but I'm not going to get into it. It's not necessarily an easy business, but the payoff is definitely there once once you're working at it and you make the right decisions from the beginning, like when you're choosing property and when you're selecting your tenants. And there's a lot of work. I guess, one of the things we always say is that there's a lot of tiny steps in between the picking a property and finding the right investment to actually getting your return on that investment. There's a lot of steps in between that, you just have to make sure that you're aware of and learning how to problem solve along the way. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question in there, but I think I did.
Yeah, you did. Basically, it comes down to the flexibility was a big thing. Being able to do something that you enjoy, having the flexibility, and I guess not trading the hours for dollars as you were in your current, like in your past career.
Yes, a lot of that. I mean, now with the pandemic, I think, I have two little ones at home, 5 and a 7-year-old, and once they stayed home for school, my like, can you picture my head just exploding? That's what happened to me. Like, it was just like, what is happening between job, kids, real estate? It was just a whole lot. It was a lot. So you have to pick what you want to prioritize, and I think that's where I landed. I'm doing something I enjoy, and working with Andrea, we're always coming up with ideas and different things that we need to do to build and grow the business, and we're learning all the way along, so it's good.
And Andrea, for yourself, so what was it that made you, I'm sure there's a lot of similarities in your reasoning, but what was it that got you to shift from teaching into moving into real estate?
Yeah, so I came here quite young when I came to Canada, and I just always envisioned, even from back home in Jamaica, I thought Canada was it's the land of opportunity. And I did love being a classroom school teacher and working with children, but I just didn't see that it was going to provide me with that opportunity to change my life, my children's life, my husband, and my family. So I thought, I worked very hard as a teacher. I made a good income. My husband worked hard at his job and made a good income, but it was tough with, good incomes to still change the lives of myself, my family, and, my extended family. And I was going to have a pension, but my husband wasn't going to be as lucky, right? So I figured real estate would be able to provide that. I could provide for my mom and my kids and ourselves. And it made sense. And as I said, as Kemba, and you can see with Kemba and I, we love love it. It's always been something that's been passion. I don't want to be that slum lord or whatever they call out there. I've always wanted to bring like beautiful products to people. Like, we put a lot of effort in making sure that whatever we create is a space, whether it be a basement or a room or a house, an apartment, it's a space that I or my family can live in. And I'm presenting that, type of product to anyone out there. So I enjoy, the benefits of what we produce as well for tenants and for owners when they're working with us to turn around a property that builds wealth for themselves and their family. So I don't know. I love it. I love every aspect of it. So sometimes we're talking about it endlessly and we don't realize, right, Kemba? But it was more to just change. I didn't want to have to think about, 20 years in Canada and not feeling that I had accomplished stuff that would change my family tree forever. Right. And I feel that we've been able to start that and accomplish a lot.
So let's talk investments for a little bit here. I guess I'm going to build a little bit of a story before I ask the question. So
Okay.
I've always thought that to get into investing, you have to own something first.
Okay.
Okay. You guys are going to let me debunk any of my thoughts that I have. Now, if that is the case, how does one, once you own, move forward in investing and actually like getting the finances to purchase more properties?
Well, I think, Tanya, you're right. It's great. I think that most people do feel that they have to have something or own something to come to the table and get to buy their first. But the possibility exists out there that you can invest with other people's money and still do very well. So I'm not saying that it's not good to come to the table with something like knowledge or the ability to have a skill to help in the relationship. Say if you decide to do it as an investment and it's not your principal residence, you could come. We have what we call working partners. We have the money partners, right? The financial partners. So you don't always have to come to the table. I believe you would agree with me, Kemba, that we can use other people's money to get started in real estate. Sometimes that's an investor. Sometimes that's the government. Sometimes it's your pension plan or your RSPs, right? So there's different ways. So I don't think that you always have to come with money, but it helps to establish good habits around money to be successful at it.
I would just add that, a lot of the time when we're starting out, we're more focused on survival aspects of living, like, you want a place to live. So if you need a place to live, you will most likely be focused on buying property for the purpose of I need to live in it. And so that's part of it. But sometimes, when you have a safe and healthy place to live that you don't need to move into, or even say you have a place to live that's cheaper than what would say you would buy.
Yes.
That's a consideration to why you may want to buy something, not move into it if you know you could get good tenants, good rent, and have it pay for your investment and stay at home or stay in your rental that's cheaper. There's practical ways to invest without actually having to buy where you live. It just depends on your situation and what you can do, but we definitely say that you don't have to buy to live in it.
No, not if it's an investment on like your principal residence, then yes, you can do it with other people's money and you can do it where you don't live in it at all. And it doesn't have to be right in your backyard either. It doesn't have to be where you live, because sometimes where you live, like where Kemba and I live right now in Toronto, it's expensive. So you can buy and invest outside of Toronto and still do well and still invest with investors, private money, government money or whatever. I think that's what you were trying to get at, Tanya, is that can you do it without coming to the table with money of your own or an asset of your own?
Because really, when I think of that, I think, okay, when's the next time somebody's going to have a big chunk of money to throw down on a deposit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It usually, like my thought would go to a refinance, right? And taking the equity that you have from your home. But it's neat to hear that there are more options than doing something like that.
And those are the things that we teach to the strategies, because I agree with you. If you're a homeowner already, we can absolutely show you how to get another and another. But if you're not a homeowner and you're just trying to get your first, we can also show you how to do that, even if you don't have that equity to pull from to do that. And we teach that to people through either our course or through our coaching that we work on. So that, and we'll help them, get the pieces in order to accomplish that successfully.
Yeah, and we always, we try to say to people, don't come with too many preconceived and too many hard and fast, I need it to be this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, because that's sometimes what holds us back too. Like when we have a perception of, say, what our investing should look like, what our property should look like, where we should live, when you have too many restrictions on what you can do, it may not allow you to accomplish the end result, which is buying a property and building wealth. So we try to tell people you have to be flexible, you have to sort of think.
We want you to be creative, think outside the box.
Yeah.
Think beyond the typical institutions and the banks that you work with, because they're not the only sources of money and funding.
It's a good place to start. I mean, there's definitely opportunity with the banks to get approvals and stuff like that. But if those are avenues that are difficult, and we can sort of talk about other ways to get into the market.
Yeah, there's other ways and other lenders outside of the 5 major banks that are willing and ready to work with you when you have the other features in place that they're looking for. We still need good credit and and other factors that make you a good candidate for someone to loan money to or to work with.
We also talk a lot about people coming together as families, because that's another way to start out, where you can't necessarily buy a property on your own, but you have a cousin, a really close friend, a family member who's like-minded, and that's another thing, like, you build that like-mindedness in people as you have more conversations about wealth building, about growing, about buying property. And so that's something that we also encourage people.
And when I was growing up, and I'm sure yourself, Kemba, and maybe Tanya, yourself and Brian, we used to have partners where you would all pool your money together and, take turns getting that amount to, whether it was to fund the purchase or to fund the furniture in the house, whatever, to do a reno in the house. So we're very resourceful and we already know how to do these things. We just need to utilize them in owning and building wealth through investing, right?
So I think it's so true what you guys say about, looking at other people, right? I think sometimes people think, oh my gosh, like that could just go horribly by doing that. But I mean, the reality is, you have your lawyer documents, you have the title, like Absolutely. All that kind of stuff. So like worst case scenario, and you always have, I guess, a buyout option, right? If things really go south.
We make sure you put an exit strategy in place in those documents so that it's, we know going in all the different moving parts that couldn't happen, because this is not rocket science and it's not new. It's already been done and established in many other communities. They've already done this and done it successfully.
Right. And I think that's the big thing, right? So looking at, like you guys said, the options, okay, it could take us 5 years to be able to do something. Whereas if we go in with family, siblings and that kind of stuff, we could be on it in the next 6 months and be ready to go, and then potentially in a couple years be able to do something again, right?
Yes.
So I like that thought process of looking at other people who you're close to who are like-minded.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because there's already people in your circle of friends and family and so forth that you can partner with, and we talk about joint ventures and using proper documentation. We're not saying just go and do this and not, write it up and make sure that there's an agreement and that you all agree to the different terms and the, like we talk about different things can occur during the time that it's in place, breakdowns in a family relationship, health, death, disability, whatever. And we make sure that we compensate in the agreement for all the possible things that could happen, and have an exit strategy and talk about that, or how to, who can buy out when and how. And
yeah, now, so one of the things I'm thinking now, whether you're buying a property as an investment property or as, your property that you're going to be living in, I think one thing that happens with a lot of people is that they just don't look at all of the costs. They look at that amount that they're approved for.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess to kind of maybe explain this a little bit better. Somebody's looking to buy a car. They go to the dealership, they get approved for this certain amount. And, they're looking at that payment and they're like, okay, I can afford this. And then they don't consider, if they're living in Toronto, parking's one thing, gas, insurance, maintenance, all of that stuff. What are some of the things that people kind of overlook that you see frequently, in terms of buying a property?
I think the major one that we would both say, Kemba, at the same time, closing costs.
Absolutely.
Closing costs, Brian, it's one of the biggest ones that people forget. Like, they don't even know what it is or what it means. And in those closing costs, there's a laundry list of things like, land transfer taxes, HST when you don't live in the property because it's a rental. There's disbursements. There's just, Kemba, there's so many costs. Like, even in that brand new condo that my husband was infatuated with and loves so much, there were so many different costs that we incurred that you don't think about if you are buying for the very first time, and then you're hit with,
Even things like mortgage insurance when you're a first-time buyer and you're buying a high ratio mortgage or with a high rate,
the 5% down or something.
There's the insurance, and so although it's you have your 5%, that insurance premium is quite a premium, and then it gets either tacked onto your payments or it's
billed to you. If depends on most financial services company will allow you to wrap it in, but if it's billed to you, that's something that would definitely throw people.
Yeah, I mean, and there's even things like when you first move into a property, there may be a few things that you need to repair, do right away. There's the cost of, well, I want to go in and do the kitchen, or I want to go in and do the bathrooms, or I want to go in and, I can't live in it like this. And so painting, all
furnishings, because maybe you're moving from a small place to a big place or vice versa.
Yeah. So there are a lot of costs wrapped into moving and to becoming an owner. For sure that you have to sort of itemize and make sure that you have extra room, even if you're a 5% downer or 20% down. There's still an extra cushion of funds that you should have set aside for.
And during the process of doing the paperwork with the lender, a lot of the times they want you to do an appraisal. That's at your cost. Mm-hmm. They want you to do or you yourself want to do an inspection, because you should, to ensure and prevent potentially, Kemba, some of those unexpected costs that may be inside or outside the property. There's, the legal fees. Like when I first learned of legal fees on one of my first purchases, I was like, what? You're only sitting with me one or two times to sign the paperwork. But there's a lot of stuff the lawyers do in the background, and the title search and all these things. And that's all billed to you as well. So that bill does not end up just being, the rest of the down payment that you think you have to bring to the table when you go to see your lawyer.
So closing costs, generally, we say estimate somewhere up to 4% sometimes, depending on
4% of the purchase price.
Right.
4% of the purchase price. So you're thinking you need 5% down for your down payment, and then you need another up to 4%. It doesn't always work out to be that high, but especially with condos, and if you're in Toronto, and there's plus.
There's condo fees as well. Those are very high. And they're not allowing us to use the amenities right now. So, those are things that if you're buying it, especially as an investment property, mm-hmm. that's part of the reason why, Tanya and Brian, the rent that I would try to generate from that property wouldn't be adequate enough, because when you add in the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the condo fees, it's not enough to carry the costs. And so, you're like, people don't even think of insurance costs. You can't close a property without putting insurance on it. The bank mm-hmm. wants that at the time of signing and, seeing off at the lawyers. And you too want to put that in place, because that's protection. If you're going to live in it, you want to protect it. If you're going to rent it, you want to protect it. Mm-hmm. Right.
Even things like disbursements, as we were talking about it, say you're buying a resale property, the owner has paid certain taxes and so on prior to, you owe them that money back.
Right.
So all of a sudden there's money you need to give back to the seller.
Or even sometimes, they owe you too. I've gotten some, like if they collected rental deposits and stuff.
Depends on the time of year that you buy.
I like when I get
Right.
the extra check.
Yeah, being on that side is always nice.
But yeah, there is definitely associated costs. Some of these, a brand new property, if you bought your brand new there, Tanya and Brian, you know that you had to pay for things like trees and driveways and fence and right. So there's just all the costs just keep going and going and going. And you have to decide which ones you're willing to take on if you're buying new or if you're buying resale, right?
So can you just clarify what situation allows to pay 5% down and what situation allows for the 20?
So for sure, the 5% in our today, especially here in most of Canada, the 5% is usually what we consider a first-time purchaser or someone who hasn't purchased for the last 4 or 5 years, because you can requalify as a first-time buyer if you've been out of the market for almost that 5-year window. The government will allow you to requalify as a first-time purchaser, and then you're entitled to that 5% up to the first $500,000. After $500,000 now, they bumped it up to the 10% on amounts greater, because otherwise you see people taking on $1 million home and all they put down is, 50,000. You're going to be swallowing in debt, right? So that's usually 5%. And Kemba, maybe share with us the 20%.
Oh, yes. So 20% is anyone who has owned and within the last 5 years, and by owned meaning you're on a mortgage, you're on a title somewhere. If you co-signed or something, you are giving up your 5% option down the road until you've been out of the market again for 5 years. So you're basically, I guess the government is seeing it as you have wealth, you have equity to pull from, you have property, and so you have to leverage that and put it into the next property in that way.
And the 20% is also, as much as investors, we try to, put as little as possible. The 20% also helps you as a purchaser to be free of that insurance that we spoke of, that CMHC coverage. And could be a huge savings as well. So when you could buy even as a first-time buyer, you can buy and put 20% in and avoid those costs.
Yes. So as a first-time buyer, it's not, you can put in any amount you want.
Yes.
As a first-time buyer as well, you do lose your 5% qualifying if you buy in areas that are outside where it's known that you will not live in the property. So if you go to the bank and you say this is specifically a rental or investment property, they will ask you to put down 20%. So you do have to, if you're buying for the first time and you're getting financing, you would have to indicate that you're going to live in it, and it should be, there's some parameters around that and we talk about that, but you can't say that I'm going to live in it and it's in London and I work in Toronto. You're not going to drive 2 hours every day. Although there are people who commute that far, in general, it's not the norm. And so you may lose your 5% option and you need to put more down if you want to buy a property outside your area.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know about that 5-year gap. So
yeah, you can requalify. So for listeners out there, if because oftentimes various things occur in people's lives that pull them out of the market for periods of time, and they can come back and use it again in the future.
Now, one thing you mentioned as well is when we're looking at rental properties is, you had said earlier, you want to really put something out there that is desirable for people. So what are some of the things that you do to make sure that you're getting the maximum return on that investment in terms of what you're able to collect as a rent?
So in terms of the features that I would add to that unit to get the maximum rent? Yeah. So I smile at this, Ryan, because it's like one of my other passions within the real estate is that basements aren't exactly the most beautiful places to live. So if I'm going to do a basement and I'm going to, renovate and bring it up to standard, I'd want to make it have the nicest features that I can. So whether it's, bringing in stone quartz countertops to make it nice, because it's not going to break the bank if I know I can get the income back in rent. I want to upgrade the kitchens and the bathrooms to, look like places that people would want to live in and, feel happy to be in. So I I do away with carpets in as many spaces as I can, whether it's in the basement or on the main level. I want to try to make sure that I give them the nicest finish in wood, whether it be laminate or vinyl, so that it can, first of all, it's good. It upgrades my property and gives value to the property, but it also adds value to the tenants and the individuals that live in there. In general, I try to put in as much high-end finishes as I can without breaking the bank, right? So if I'm going to put in a new toilet, I'm not going to cheap out and put the one with the flusher anymore. I want the one that you press down like that. No one can see me as I'm speaking right now, but they get it, right? But because those things matter. If someone will be like, oh, Andrea, you could just do a shower curtain. Absolutely not. If I can afford glass enclosure, please put the glass enclosure, because I know I'm going to get the return on my investment, not just from the rent, but also from the value of that property when I get it appraised or when I'm going to sell it. And those things make a difference. When people walk into my basement units or walk into Kemba, our finished spaces that we've done over, whether it's a coat of paint that makes it look fantastic, or some of those upgrades that I've mentioned, like the quartz countertop, the laminate floors, or the, vinyl floors, because in basements, I tend to put vinyl floors to give it, first of all, it's a little nicer feel than tiles, which are cold, and carpet, which holds dirt, right? So I also find in Kemba and I, over the years, it's one of the things that we like to be creative on, is doing furnished rentals. And so when we do furnished rentals, we get improved pricing for rent, as well as we find that for a lot of places, like in Edmonton, we find that people are coming and going, and it fits that market there in Edmonton. They're not always staying long term. They're coming into the province to work. And so giving furnished rentals, we get slightly higher value on the rents, and we get, a really nice product that you can. And I don't know, you can add to that.
Well, I think just in the people side of it, if you offer people nice home and you've vetted good tenants and so on, generally they will be more willing to take care of it because it's welcoming, it's nice, it's, you can't always get into a rental property and throw money at it and renovate it, but when you have an opportunity to select a unit or make sure that you're changing something in it, you want to make it nice so people will also take care of it. People generally, if you offer them something good, they will take care of it.
That's right.
9 times out of 10, there are the crazy.
There's very few. We've been doing this for years, and I honestly feel that in terms of letting tenants go, I've probably done it maybe twice over 15 plus years. And as well, I agree with everything that you said, Kemba, but I also what I found in general when we're renting out and giving beautiful spaces is that we're not doing it all ourselves, Brian and Tanya. We have property managers, we have housekeeping, we have staff that help us to manage and maintain these properties. So we ensure that we're not spending, I don't spend most of my money and money from my husband's and I's household. We're using the property's value to do those upgrades and those finishes. So that home equity line of credit, that refinancing, the property itself is paying for these features that we're adding to the property. So it makes sense. And, banks like when you take care of their asset because they feel they've got a bit of the hand in your pocket as well, making sure that you do those things that make them happy as well as when you're adding that value.
Of a hand in your pocket. They have a lot of hand in your pocket.
They have a lot of hand in our pockets. And they, every time I've ever done any project and they've come out to do appraisals or look at it, they're like, wow, this is nice. A couple of times I was asked, is this this house looks staged? I'm like, no, this is how it is. I only give good things. I only hand over nice things to my tenants. Yeah. Like one of them, I told you, Kemba, she outright just said, is this like a staged property or something?
And it's nice to know that, right? Because you always hear the horror stories of being a landlord, not like people not paying for a year. And,
Yes.
I'm sure you've heard or seen, but like any time where you can stay clear away from that and just have tenants who, every month you're going to get your rent, that they're taking care of the property
Yes.
or feeling even some sense of ownership.
Yes.
That's nice. So you get what you give, right?
Yeah. Tanya, I'll say this, I am dealing with a situation now where I have an unpleasant tenant. and it's difficult, it's challenging, it's not great, but I would say that even through that, buying a good property, buying in a good location, you can weather a lot from a poor tenant, even in a bad situation, because you've bought a good product, and there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. There will be ways to deal with it. It's not ideal, and there can be stress related to it, but for sure, I think obviously 2020 and 2021 is just it's just, I don't know, when an outlier they call it, like just from how it all pans out. So you just have to sort of figure out strategies to get you through the stressful times with difficult tenants. But at the same time, if you are buying good properties and you're buying them in good areas, you will be able to get past difficult situations like that.
There's still value. Don't lose value when you end up in a bad situation or with a bad, or like clients. We are in an area, we're in Ontario. Ontario has a landlord and tenant board and act that favors tenants over owners. So there's absolutely, yeah, that's definitely there compared to other provinces where there's a bit more equitable relationships. But I think it's worth putting the money into these properties and buying, like Kemba said, buying right in the right location, because I don't believe in, giving a product like something that I could never live in. I couldn't rent out. And even when we go to help others rent their properties, we have to let them know it doesn't look good. Like it needs a bit of a paint, it needs some cleaning. We can't put tenants into properties like this in this type of condition, because the way you hand it over to them is what you're going to get back, or possibly worse, right? So we have high expectations for our owners and our tenants and for ourselves as well to give the best.
Now that's interesting, because you said earlier, the properties don't necessarily have to be around the corner. I wasn't expecting you to say Edmonton.
I know. Don't worry. We didn't think Edmonton ever when we started, but we do have some properties in Edmonton as well. It made sense. The numbers worked, and we have great teams out there and great staffing out there. So, and I did literally mean that. I'm okay even in the Caribbean. Show me one and I'll buy it.
So can I ask a question? Pros and cons in regards to a new build purchase. So let me again line this up. A phase one purchase, knowing that once it's completed, you are going to sell it. So there's my first, and or a long-term purchase.
That's good. That's interesting. I've been there. I've bought new like that. And I agree. First of all, Tanya, when we buy new, we try to buy it before, if we can get in before it opens to the public, especially in condos, because then you buy and you get value in it built in, because the builder is oftentimes bringing it to their realtors. And so, Kemba, would you agree? We typically, if we're going to buy a new build, we're going to try to see if we can get in before it even reaches the public, so that we can buy some built-in value. Because then, Tanya, if I'm not going to keep it and I'm going to sell it, I want to get the most out of it, right? And I want to be able to walk away with, maybe 100,000, right? In terms of resale, it all depends on where it's situated, but for sure, like we have clients who, a resale makes more sense than a new purchase, because they want to live in it. And if you want to live in it and you don't want to do all the work, because a new purchase is a lot of work, right? You're buying something that's pretty much unfinished, even when the builder finishes and hands it over to you. There's a lot of work still to do. So in terms of value, are you asking, do you make more with resale?
Yeah, and I'm thinking of like the capital gains and stuff like that. So once you add that all into a new build that you sell, and the reason why I think this is because in Brantford right now, what's happening, I was talking to an agent down here, is you have all these investors buying in phase one, and the house isn't even built and they're already selling it, right? So I'm sure, they're trying to make like 200K off of it. But I wonder, like, what's, obviously they're going to make some money off of it, but what's the benefit once you deduct like the capital gains and different things like that?
Well, no, I think it really depends on their strategy, because if you buy a resale, maybe you're thinking of a longer term hold, you're still accumulating capital gains as the value grows. It's just not in such a short space of time. So the tax man will always collect. It's just in what time frame. So with the new builds, and you're earning money you hand over fist, say, like, because it's such a short time frame and the value has gone up quickly, you will owe taxes.
Absolutely.
But it's not necessarily any different than if you buy a resale, because you will owe taxes on that resale if you sell it down the road. It's just
And 100,000 on a new build today and 100,000 on a resale today, they're the exact same tax liability, right? If you bought it and you didn't move in to live in it, it's 100%. It's going to be, you're going to pay capital gains on it. If you lived in it and it was your principal residence, then there is no capital gains, right? That's your money because it was your principal residence. So either way, you're paying taxes if it's a new build or a resale and you bought it with the purpose of renting it out or investing in it, you're going to pay capital gains. And it's whatever your tax rate is, unless you bought it in a corporation. Because Tanya, if you're asking us for strategies, there are ways to defer paying that tax. And we can teach you that. Absolutely. We can show you how to defer. You don't have to pay the taxes now. You can pay it later. That's right. So if you don't want to pay it right now, absolutely, we can show you how and where you can, sort of set that up to ensure that. But the capital gains is the same. If it was bought with the intention to earn money, right? That's an investment. Then the tax CRA says taxes is owed on 50% of that 100,000 that you just made is taxed at whatever your personal tax rate is. 50,000 is free to you. 50,000 is taxed. And so if you're paying, say, let's use simple numbers, 50%, then 50% of that 50,000 is paid to the government. So 25,000 of the 100,000 total is paid in taxes. And that's really how capital gains works. So, I mean, you made 100 and the government is saying, well, we want a piece of the pie. And so they're expecting to get at least that 25 and 75 you walk away. If it was your home and you lived in it and you can show that, then 100% of it is gains to you and nothing shared with CRA. Right. In terms of dollar, you're often having to disclose still that it is your principal residence, but you don't have to pay any taxes on it. And I'll tell you, Tanya, most builders are trying to prevent you from buying with the intention that you can earn on the property. So they're trying to sell it at the most that they can sell it so that you can't come in behind them and make any money, especially in a home. Especially in a home, because a lot of the times they don't allow you to assign it before you mortgage it. And so it's very challenging. So the people that you're hearing speak of this, I'd love to hear their stories, because usually the builder is not allowing on a home purchase, brand new home, they won't allow you to sign it. They expect that you close with the lawyer and mortgage it in order to acquire it at the end. So those people that are selling, they have to be selling and mortgaging. And then, unlike a condo, you can buy a condo, you can carry it through the 2, 3, 4 years that it may take to build. And the builder will allow you somewhere during the time that, before it's closing, they will allow you to assign it to another buyer and gain. And so in condos, you can often gain and capitalize on that spread between when you bought it 3 years ago. Like last year, when I was ready to close that condo, it had gone up in value substantially in the spring before COVID sort of unfolded, so that if I wanted to sell it, I could have walked away with probably about 150,000 if I'd sold it in the spring and assigned it, not closed it. But the people that are speaking of the exercising, buying resale, usually they're having to close and then disclose their earnings to the government.
Okay, just before we wrap up, one quick question. How do you win a bidding war?
How do you win? You walk away. You don't enter. You don't take them on. No fighting. We're lovers of real estate, but we don't want to go out there and fight. And that's what a bidding war is. It's a fight. The only way to win a bidding war is to have the biggest bid, and that to me is not a win. That's a loss.
Yeah. And unless you have a property that you can definitely see, you can put, additional on top of what you've already overpaid for it to bring it up to a certain standard. It's in the right neighborhood. There's a lot of factors you have to, bring together to say it is worth it to pay over and above, like what some of the numbers we're hearing today. For it. So I think there's not a lot of opportunity to win in a bidding war and actually as an investor make money money in the current situation we're seeing where, but a lot of it is not necessarily investors who are doing that. It's a lot of, people who want a place to live, and they're willing to pay
It's
for
emotions that are driving those bidding wars.
Yeah.
Because most investors would walk away from that. Why? Because you push the value up to greater than its market value and you've actually lost. We try to buy under the
Right.
market value or the asking price, right? So that we go in with some built-in equity.
There are strategies though that people have used, and we have someone who has used that strategy just recently in the last 12 months. She bought during COVID and she sent a letter to the owner, and
She said a bidding war.
But
it's a bidding war, so it's very challenging. I totally agree. There are ways to put your offer in with a nice, cushiony letter to say how I love your place and it reminds me of back home and my parents. But in a bidding war, that's not going to work. I would say do a bully offer and you can potentially win. And so if you precede that bidding date, you can win. And she did not do it in a war situation. She did.
I guess so. That's true. There are ways to try to sweeten your deal.
Absolutely.
With closing and I never advocate for no conditions, but that is something people tend to do to help them win the bid. But generally, money talks, especially in today's numbers. Money is what really will get you. And we just don't see it right now that you should be paying. I mean, a little bit over maybe, but some of the overages we're hearing.
Yeah, and I think, Kemba, I would say, and Tanya, that I won one war because I walked away. It was a purchase in Cambridge. I walked away because they had an offer date. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, you can put your offer. I said, absolutely not. Because my offer was never going to be greater than his asking. And what happened was I just let it slide because I walked away. 2 or 3 weeks later, the offer that he accepted fell apart. So, and I almost 100% sure that it fell apart because in the end, when I bought it at my price because he came back to me now. And that was the only way I was going to win that war was because several other people were going forward and they pushed and escalated the price. But I waited, and I wasn't waiting on it to fall apart. I just said, no, I'm not interested in offering. And 3 weeks later, he came back. I said, well, I'm happy to make an offer at this point, but it's not going any greater than you're asking. And so he was willing now because he was trying to, sell that property. And the property, I know for 100%, I'd work the numbers out. Even if I paid $50,000 over asking in 2017, it would have been able to the income from the property could carry. But I am an investor. I buy close to asking or less than asking. And I absolutely want to improve my cash flow. I left my job for a reason.
Right.
I want to improve my cash flow, not encroach on it with, giving extra money to the seller. So that's the only way I won on that one was I walked away because my agent kept saying, oh, you sure, Andrea? I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, who do you work for, him or me? And he was actually a realtor himself. And that's the only way I won was because his offer fell apart. And I think it fell apart because the other person who bid went over, they couldn't get the financing.
Right. Awesome. Now, I know we covered a lot. Is there anything that we didn't ask you yet that you think is worth noting at this point?
Yes. We're very excited about our course that we've been building because, we've had time and time again. Everyone wants to know, Andrea, Kemba, how did you do it? Right? Like, honestly, you can do some of it without your own money. And so we've built a course called Secrets to Success in Real Estate. And it really is for the first-time purchaser, whether they're buying the first time for themselves to live in or for the first time as an investor. And it's going to be amazing. So far, we've started the course doing a live version right now. And we've got our final version of it coming up for individuals to take on. It's probably about 24 hours or so of total coverage in terms of lessons and all the secrets that would take you from novice to, being able to have that successful purchase.
Yes.
So Kemba, you can add to it, but I'm excited because I think that is going to change the purchasing power of many of our people in our community, the women that we so want to see successful, because I started buying my first property in real estate as a single mom coming out of university. And I was like, I mean, I bought my first property, was a townhome, and I thought it was like this amazing mansion. It wasn't. I know it wasn't, but I was still thrilled and excited about it. And I want to see a lot of other single women or moms do the same thing. And we want to see our community, you know, be empowered to say, yes, I'm building wealth, not just for me today, because many of them already own, but we want to show them how to own and build a legacy. And we believe that this course is that course for them, to help them build that legacy, retire, have money to retire, go back to some warm Caribbean place that you loved, or even change the lives of your family, right? Your not just your immediate family, but your parents, your aunts, uncles, whoever.
Yeah. So it's really meant to, you know, empower and give people confidence to take the leap, because I think a lot of people may talk about it, think about it, like say, it's something I want to do, but then they're all just maybe not, they don't feel like they have the knowledge or the resources.
They're fearful that no one wants to lose, right? Or
yeah, and everything that's in the news, in the market, you know, is sort of telling people, oh, it's impossible. Oh, you know, can't be done. But, you know, just in March, we had somebody close on our first property, and it's like, you know.
And she's over the moon. Yeah. And she did that through a government funded program that we helped her, you know, successfully complete. So.
Yeah, there's ways to do it. And if you sort of look at it and you sort of find the knowledge you need, and you can do it. It's just, don't just think that it'll happen. It does take, you know,
work and knowledge.
So that's all. We want to share people how to do that.
No, I love that. I think that's so helpful, because it's overwhelming for sure if you're a newbie, right? And you could Google all you want.
Yes.
And every article or every website is going to share different information. So it's tricky. It will be nice to have like somewhere to go and just get like all your boxes checked as you go through the course. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I find that I love Google. Google knows a lot.
Yes.
But Google doesn't always give us, you know, practical, you know, how to implement actionable steps. And sometimes it's not even Canadian, right? So the content that we're getting, a lot of the real estate content that I started learning initially was, I'm like, but this doesn't happen here in Canada, right? Because a lot of it is US, right? Yeah. So we've made it so that it could be very practical for our people here, as well as it can reach, because we've tried to not make it just so that it's right in Ontario alone. It could be across the globe. So it's knowledge that everyone needs, because everyone needs to have a place to live, and everyone needs to have and feel that they can build to have a retirement fund or to have an education fund, and different ways to just, you know, finance their lifestyles.
And lastly, before we let you go, where can we find you?
Okay, so, well, we are, you know, people of today. We're on Instagram, so Keen on You. Also, if you're checking us out, we have a website, www.kean, group.ca, and we're everywhere. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. But if you check us out on Instagram, you can get connected anywhere else or on our website.
Facebook as well.
Facebook, yeah, we're on Facebook.
And LinkedIn. Well. That's where I found you.
That's right. And LinkedIn. I mean, you name it today, we're there. I think we even have a TikTok account.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, ladies.
Yes, thank you both for having us.
Yeah, Tanya, friend, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.